Hi, this is Privateer Station, and today we're bringing you another special. It's a Yulia Latynina interview with Mikhail Podolyak. In his current capacity, Mikhail serves as the advisor to the head of the office of the President of Ukraine. This one happened on the 9th of December, about 5 days ago. Many of you have asked to translate that so they could share it with their English-speaking friends, family members, and all. So here it is. Enjoy. It is indeed a good one. All right, I hope we are live. This is Yulia Latynina. Okay, yes, I get a confirmation, it's good. This is Yulia and Mikhail Podolyak, advisor to the office of Zelensky. And we ask dear viewers to not forget to click subscribe, like, and share the stream. And here goes my main question to you, Mikhail. You said today that Ukraine is on track to get Patriot systems and Abrams tanks and many other things. If you can elaborate further on rather soon, what do you mean? Well, it's weeks, maybe months at tops. Sorry, I forgot to say good evening. That is my mission. But yeah, to answer your question, I think it will happen much sooner than most people think. There is a fundamental transformation happening in the civilized countries of the world supporting Ukraine in their understanding and nomenclature that is getting definitely reflected in the nomenclature that we receive. We often talk about certain type of missiles with a certain range and specifically in relation to the type of warfare Russia wages against us, and definitely armored vehicles to support our offensive maneuvers, and of course artillery shells to maintain our capacity in the artillery, because Russia definitely has a huge advantage in terms of number of guns, of artillery guns. Mikhail, sorry, there was something with your sound. It started disappearing. Is it all right now? Yeah, it is all right now. Sorry, I lost the train of thought, but I was talking about the armor. So the armor is very important, especially when we are undertaking operations like in Kharkov and in Kherson. The value of armored vehicles is immense, and we do need more of those. We don't have enough. And also in terms of artillery, Russia has a huge advantage in numbers. And in this war, 90 to 92% of dead and wounded are due to artillery. So it's mostly losses related to shells and mortar rounds, and that's pretty much the most effective weapon in this war right now. And the more we get of that type of weaponry, the sooner we'll be able to put an end to this war, to finish it. So I had a technical question here, and it's related to your sound. I have a feeling that when you're looking directly at your iPad, at your camera, the sound is great. The moment you look away, the sound becomes duller, it kind of disappears, not completely, but definitely. If you can, please try not turn your head sideways. And I do get questions here from viewers. Thank you, and comments. Some people are saying thank you for coming out live, and you are making our days during this war less horrible. Okay, next to the news, we see that Americans are going to continue supplying armor, and they're going to supply Abrams to Poland, and they're not resisting, they're not against Germany supplying Leopards to Ukraine. So is that correct, that all these Abrams that were supplied to Poland may end up in Ukraine? They will end up in Ukraine? Not exactly like that. Each country who gets such military support, say Poland, it'll be up to them how to deal with these weapons. But there is a strong probability that, yes, we will partake in receiving that help. And it is also important that it's not just the tanks, it also has to be shells, certain 120 caliber shells that are standard for NATO tank machines. And I think that that story where we've been talking and saying that we indeed do not have enough armored vehicles and tanks, and I think that story is finally coming to an end, where our allies realize that we indeed need that, and they indeed need to supply that. Nomenclature. And due to the intensity of our fighting in this war, the old Soviet equipment, what is being used by Russian side, is definitely getting worn out. So at this point, they're at about 85% wear and tear, and they're losing their effectivity. Also, it's a good moment for us to get that supply, because Russian equipment is definitely subpar to the modern NATO technologies. And yes, I understand we will not have enough in the same numbers, but just the effectivity of what we are going to get is definitely going to play a huge role. Okay, so the next question, why do you think Patriot systems are not being supplied to Ukraine? This is a complicated question, and I think this is part of that review of their conservative views on this war, where they probably have another step, maybe half a step, to realize that they should not be afraid of Russia in its current political stance and technological stance as well. That providing high technology equipment doesn't escalate the war as it is, that Ukraine knows how to use that, and Ukraine is using all the real heavy and deadly weapons on military targets, on the battlefields. We do not terrorize population. We do not do something else with weapons, so they can see that we are a reliable partner. And the earlier stance was that, no, we will not give any modern equipment to the transit zone, which they called Ukraine for a long time. And now they're realizing that Abrams, Leopards, Patriots, all these systems are on the verge of getting supplied, because they're just ready mentally to understand that this country, our country, is not a gray zone. It's an outpost of NATO, essentially. That's what we are. I think that story of Ukraine being a transit, or like some people called it rather brutally, a sanitar territory between Russia and the West, sanitation territory. So I think that story is coming to an end, and the story that Russia is a partner, that there is a gray transit zone, and Ukraine is a part of the interests of Russia, and Ukraine therefore should not be supported with any new weapons from NATO or other allies. We're about 2 steps away from completely dismantling that narrative. Ukraine is a country that is going to Europe, that is aligning its future with NATO and Europe. And de facto, with what we're doing here on the front, we already have a right to use weapons created by NATO. So we hope that that will also realize rather soon, and we see the trends happening. It's also not just about NATO. When you see that our foe on the front creates complicated attacks on our civilian targets. And yeah, we understand, of course, there is Bakhmut and difficult part of the front that's basically very reminiscent of Verdun back in the First World War. It's just a no man's land, dead zone. And of course, the second aspect of this war is a lot of cruise missiles, a lot of other missiles used by Russia, different missile types on civilian energy targets and just other array of civilian targets. A lot of these can be shot down by old systems because they're old Russian missiles. They can be shot by S-300s, S-400s, but Patriot systems can also help immensely, of course. and Spain was supplying us a lot of air defense elements, and the story with dogs' eyes being sent to embassies and to the companies in Spain, that weird terror campaign against them, that actually is a response to Spain playing a very active role in supporting our air defense systems. Okay, sorry, Mikhail, I get some screams at me here in chat. People are saying that perhaps your sound is floating because you have no headphone. Do you have a headphone with microphone? No, sorry, Yulia, I'm just talking open like that. I don't use headsets. Oh, wait a sec. Just as you said headset, the quality of the sound became much better. But I don't know, it's some magic, but now we can hear you fine. Apologies for deviating into technical aspects of this conversation. And, oh yes, Julia, don't apologize. It's important. We need to respect our viewers. Okay, now we're getting to the important part of this conversation, to Putin's war with electric transformers. I actually wrote a big article in a European newspaper on that topic, and I think I post factum realized I forgot to look into one side of that question. Maybe you can help me now. 13 million is the cost of one Ha missile that are mostly being used 101. And how much is the transformer? What's the price of a transformer, the big industrial transformer? How many transformers can this missile destroy per one explosion, per one hit? And so, yeah, how much is that transformer? How long does it take to produce it? And what's the chance what is Putin's chance in the war against the transformers? Very good question. We will not give him exact mathematics, of course, so he would have no heightened expectations from his type of war. Now I have this view in my mind from his recent speech holding a flute of champagne with the slurry speech where he's saying that he's now got an ideal understanding of this war and he will be destroying Ukrainian infrastructure because Donetsk wasn't supplied with enough water from Ukraine. And people in Russian Federation are watching that absurd slurred speech, and unfortunately many of them are reaffirming him and saying that what a great guy, he's so smart, and because he basically invented that new fake, will now continue killing citizens of Ukraine and destroying their energy infrastructure. So, talking about destruction, it is hard to destroy even one transformer with X or Ha, whatever we call these missiles. Most likely it'll be somewhat damaged by shrapnel. The big ones are pretty expensive. The big transformers are definitely not cheap, but their price is tens of times cheaper than the price of a cruise missile, even if it's an older modification. So the other side of this question is that main planning facility center, which Hristo Groziev did a great journalism on. So they outlined these distribution transformers. The main thing here is not about the size of the transformer they're hitting, but how many lines does it support? How many lines do go from that transformer station to other cities, settlements, villages, towns? So they highlighted a number of these transforming stations, and they highlighted them as important targets. So we understand that. We're trying to reinforce to make sure we do cover these stations. And what they're doing, they use the first wave to wake our air defense systems and to overload it, to initially load it with targets. With the second wave, they try to achieve the oversaturation of airspace to overload these stations. And usually the third wave, the third volley that's coming in the same day, is hitting the targets they are going for. So at the time when our air defense system is somewhat oversaturated, they're trying to achieve their goals. and they're using more precise, high precision weapons in the third volley. So we understand the tactics, and we're trying to counter that. But still, the cost of one missile being used is tens of times more than the cost of the destroyed transformer, destroyed station. The problem is that for us, it is maybe a couple days to restore that. It's essentially the question of bringing another box, setting it in place, connecting, and turning the electricity back on. It does take some time. It can take, from 2 to 5 days. And it does have some psychological effect on our people, on our citizens, because imagine they're sitting without the light, without electricity for 24 or 48 hours during winter. And of course, it's not just electricity light, it's also heating, it's often pumping facilities if it's a bigger scale blackout. So sewage system goes down for a few days. So what Putin achieves with these attacks, he creates a higher degree of discomfort, disconnects people so they don't have convenient communication, so they are more disconnected, perhaps may start panicking. Imagine, there's nothing need to imagine. Go back to 3 weeks ago when we had a short-term blackout throughout the whole country, where our combined energy system was disconnected and torn into standalone islands, which had some electricity at that time. So he is trying to play on that. But if you compare the price, I don't think the price matters in his mind, because right now he understands just fine that the cost of his war is literally his life, this in his position. He doesn't care if the missile costs 13 million, he is eager to buy another 1,000 missiles. What is he trying to do from Iran, regardless of the cost? Even if Iran jacks up the price 10 times higher, which its usual cost, its usual price on that kind of market, for him it doesn't matter, because for him it is important to achieve the highest level of damage and to hopefully create some panic in Ukraine to achieve some of his goals. I talked on purpose not only about the cost of that generator, of the transformer, but also about the time frame. How long does it take to build one and transport it to Ukraine? So I heard that the time frame for the industrial transformer production is up to 9 months. Yes, he calculates that as well. There is definitely part of that calculation in their plan. But again, it's not so easy to destroy transformer completely, even with his missiles when they hit the plants. So it is a poor calculation to think that he'll completely destroy them. Also, and in many cases, it's just a matter of repairs. Also, we are making an effort to work proactively with our partners to make sure that we do have a good stock of these transformers. Very often, it is a right situation that these transformers very often serve for 20, 25 years if you use them right. So there is not a ready conveyor mass production of them in the world, but if you set your logistics right, you can find enough spare parts, enough components. And unfortunately, due to all these attacks, we do have about 12 gigawatts of energy being transported to our users, while our peak loads are up to 15 gigawatts. So we're solving these questions. We can do planned blackouts to compensate for the difference, but we're also solving the logistics of repairing and replacing several different components of these energy systems with our partners. So the main task is physical defense of the existing transformers, and that is being achieved by using concrete, sandbags, reinforcement of the actual stations, and it does make sense also. We use that, we try to reinforce these areas with air defense systems, which are usually enough to shoot down Russian weapons, because most of these missiles that they send are of pretty older generations and a bit easier to shoot down. So do you have any expectation when you will have the full closure of Ukrainian sky for Russian missiles. That is happening right now. Let's start with that. We are getting a lot of support for air defense systems. First systems are coming already through the border, and we are positioning them on the priority directions, as we know the routes of where the missiles fly, because they are shooting them from certain locales, and it's rather easy to calculate the general areas of attack. And of course, we're covering the areas, the most important targets that they're hitting. So that system of closed sky is being built right now. And it's worked on both sides. Here internally, we figure out the better structure, but we also figure out logistics to make sure that it's not 5 or 6 missiles being ready to be used to shoot down the volley, but that we have a higher capacity, 20, 30, so we can bring down more with one air defense system. And Russia is definitely using the climate and natural weather pattern to emphasize the effectivity of their attacks on the energy system, attacking that in winter. And they do cause quite a bit of a headache for us because you understand, if it's a heating system in a multi-story building, if the electricity goes out and the heating station goes out, we need to siphon the water out from the pipes, because otherwise there is a risk of them bursting and freezing. So that's what we face. Okay, Mikhail, I thought there was a pause or something. No, I'm done. I was done with the statement. Okay, so my next commentary question. After we understand there is up to about 100 missiles per each volley, but after that air station in Engels, where according to the news somebody smoked something and there was some damage to some of the strategic bombers, and I want to say Engels is the only airfield where they send their air jets with missiles. That's the only field where they fly from. According to reports, 2 of them got completely damaged, 1 significantly damaged. They're saying that it was 2 141 Strish with changed intelligence, with upgraded intelligence that hit that airfield. But 2 others that got destroyed and 1 damaged. They have 16 missiles each. They carry 16 missiles each, 6 in a drum and 10 under the wings. So after these 2 were out, we understand their volley is at least 30 missiles less. And after there was that so-called smoking incident on the airfield, they had to relocate the strategic bombers. So what do you think? Do you think these smoking incidents will continue happening? To briefly answer your question, Yulia, of course. Of course, because we have no other choice. Russia, as a country, is officially saying that we'll be doing genocidal war, destroying your energy systems. Ukraine is conducting a defensive war on the territory of Ukraine. And we are here destroying all the logistics and supplies of Russian military on our territory. In regards to the incidents on the territory of Russian Federation, then Russia either is smoking too much and people are sabotaging their own procedures that they have there, or Russia needs to officially say that they are incapable of protecting even their strategic objects, and highlight by doing that to their own population that, by the way, you guys exchanged your political discourse, freedoms, human rights in exchange for security. And you're offered an army of Russia and security and the government and the country that is being afraid of by any neighbor. And that nobody will attack you, nobody will do anything to you, nobody will cause you harm. You exchanged these freedoms for that, for security. But right now, they are essentially seeing that they've exchanged that for smoke and mirrors. Nobody can guarantee safety even for their strategic sites, strategic objects. The ones that carry the key capabilities of causing major destruction in that war, they're doing on the territory of neighbor country. We also should highlight that mobilization also reaffirmed that Russian government does not see any value in its citizenry, but going to the neighbor country and dying there for the ideas of the leader, to highlight the greatness of the plan of the general strategist and how he is presented internally, a genius, Mr. Putin. So, however, these days, Russia starts to understand that the war became is changing a flow. It is changing now, and there are a lot of territorial defense systems being spun in the border regions with Ukraine. They're having regular trainings and with bomb shelters in the border regions with Ukraine. So people do understand that their life is literally in danger. Their lives have changed. They're not the same. They also have a number of incidents, which is increasing number of incidents with people with arms terrorizing local population. And they now have to figure things out with that. And what's exacerbating this problem is that people who are going to this war very often are going to that war for maraudering. They're not there to fight for any ideal. They're often going to pillage, to steal things, to rape population. So guess where they're usually stationed? They're usually stationed not far from the border initially. So borderline regions of Russia, also their citizens are feeling and the increase of criminality and the influx of criminality in their regions. There is no stability. They exchanged that for supposed security, but there is no security. And they're feeling that this is increasing. It is on an increasing slope. Moreover, Russia is under sanctions, so they cannot do key repair works, including maintenance and amplifying the perimeter of security around their key infrastructure objects. And that often leads to smoking incidents because one can deduce that people do not take their responsibility serious anymore and they start smoking where they shouldn't be. So here we face an important philosophical question. You know, when you start something, you need to understand that another country may be different, not exactly how you imagine that in your epic dreams, and that Ukraine is not a country created by Lenin, by his decree. It is the country where people do not listen to you on TV, where people ask you simple questions. Who are you? Our chat is screaming with comments, and the topic of television is on top of that, of the things being discussed. I think the topic should be generally quieting down because the infight between Putin's opposition is not helping anybody but Putin. But this is an important topic that we cannot avoid. Latvia revoked the license from TV channel Rain. Reporters Without Borders already came out and asked Latvia to not cancel the license. You, I heard, said to Plushev, one of the correspondents there, that you will still be coming to TVRain and giving interviews there. What's your attitude to that television? Okay, let's try to be objective here. We live in a different world. For us, we do not have a problem with TVRain. We have another problem. We have a problem that our citizens are being killed en masse by Russian citizens. Genocidal murder. We have very defined, well-defined priorities. It's rather black and white, where is good and where is bad in this war. And to not play these games of freedom of speech and all, there is a moral dilemma here. It's, are you for the freedom of speech or not? Not that. The moral dilemma here we are facing is the war where there are killers and there are victims. Yes, the victims are actively resisting, and the victims are much more active than expected, and eventually they will collect the toll from these murderers who came here to kill us. We don't understand how you can look for choice in that moral dilemma. You either recognize war as war, and you understand there is no ethics in this war, that you realize that these are murderers who invaded the foreign territory. And it doesn't matter if they're your citizens and you call them, if you're citizens of the same country, you have to call them murderers, because that's what they are. And when you start talking about if the war finished in 3 days, there would be less victims, wait a second, do you mean that if Kyiv would be taken in 3 days, what does it mean? I was in Kyiv here, we were in Kyiv. Are you implying that if my children would be dead in 3 days, there would be less victims? Do you realize that, right? You can sit in Latvia and talk about that from there, that's one point of view. But I think that's a fundamental bending of morale, because this is not about journalism and not about the freedom of speech. What also affected me, impressed me, was a tragedy-like hysteria on the social by the owner of that TVRain. Would you perhaps, addressing her, would you perhaps want to visit those 400 and plus families whose children were killed or died during this war from Russian weapons, and tell them that it's such a tragedy to fire a guy over his statement about Russian soldiers? Remember, perhaps go to talk to the father of a teenager who got killed next to him by Russian missiles. The dad who was sitting for 4 hours holding his dead son's hand, not letting him go. Perhaps you want to tell that to that person? So for us, this is an offensive. This is wrong. When we see the journalist swallowing tears and saying, "Oh, the boy I fired, I had to fire you," and that's the boy, or so-called boy, an adult man who was saying that in 3 days the war could be over with much lesser victims. I keep thinking that this war still requires us to communicate, that I still need to give interviews, I still need to talk to different journalists. But I think that we need to be on the same, at least in the same moral reality, because I cannot be giving interview to the person who is saying that if Mikhail, you'd be dead in 3 days in Kyiv, I would be doing my journalism, everything would be fine. Right? He'd be doing interviews about the war. He'd probably make an interesting TV show about Prigozhin and his career. I think this is a wrong precipice for such a discussion. Then, if they are peddling this side of the conflict, this side of view, then they should be sincere. Then they should come out and say, you know, it is really bad that you guys are resisting for 10 months here. Just be open. Don't slip it under the carpet here and there and make a slip of tongue in different speeches. Just openly say, we are upset that you're resisting. We understand that it's difficult to name things directly, and not everybody likes us. Our partners do not always like us when we are blunt, because we often tell them, hey, how you guys feeling there in a restaurant, discussing things and eating foods? When our kids are hiding in the cold shelters, in the underground, from Russian missiles, they often come back and say, well, could you be a little less sharp? Could you speak differently? We understand your pain, but it's a little discomforting how you bring things up in the conversations with us. We answer, no, we cannot, because it's very high voltage now. It's very sharp for us. We see every day, every morning, reports that 10 civilians are dead, 20 wounded. And on the front, 10 are dead, 50 are wounded. And these are concrete sons, fathers, dads of their children. It is perhaps not so easy to realize that reality when you're sitting in a TV studio in a different country, that you cannot just take the side of Russian Federation and say that these are the soldiers, these are the good guys. just say that. If you are taking that side, be open and say that you are supporting Russian Federation in this war. And then me, Mikhail Podolyak, will say that, I'm not on the same moral field with you. We're definitely in different realities. And in this case, I will have to reconsider, how do I appear if I appear on the other side's TV channel? But escalating that to a tragedy of firing somebody over these statements, I'm looking at that thinking people are losing the feeling of where they are, that they're losing the grasp on what is freedom of speech and democracy, what is this war. We trusted that people may understand this war properly and what is happening properly, but we see that no, not in all cases they do. Can I ask you directly, very recently you said that both Katrikadze and Zitko, chief editors, they took the right position, made the right managerial decisions, and their position is anti-war and pro-Ukraine. And now I see you changing your opinion. And according to what I hear, you changed your opinion after the owner of the TV channel, after Sendeyeva made her post. Exactly. I think on Tuesday, when I discussed this topic, and before that, there was an appropriate statement by Katrikadze, so I considered that they indeed understood the depth of their mistakes. It was very offensive what was said on that channel for us. And it's a sincere statement. We have a lot of people dead in this war. We did not attack anybody. We did not attack Russia back in 2014. We did not annex Crimea from Russia. We did not enter Donbass. There are no people of Donbass. Nobody was bombing that territory. No kids were killed there by Ukrainians. They were Russian criminal enclaves who were set by Russia, who were attacking us these years. That was the reason for the whole war. Russia was hitting us, stabbing us in the back, and invented that concept of green soldiers without any insignia. And Europe, who took the position of, hey, give them the territory, they will not kill you, didn't work out like this. They started killing us this year, again. And back in the day, the judgments should have been made proper. Back then, they should have said that Crimea is always the territory of Ukraine. Perhaps we would not be in this war today. And now, since we are in this war, 9 months after the beginning of this war, and a man with all seriousness on the TV is saying that they are our citizens, and since they are our compatriots, we need perhaps to do our best to help them with their daily lives on the front, in the trenches, to basically help the soldiers waging terrorist activity, terrorist war, genocidal war. Is that what you're saying? So, in my opinion, you know what I would do? There is a crisis. There is a person who made a mistake, a wrong statement. I would gather the whole group of journalists. I would turn the cameras on. I would be there and say, we, as journalists, realize that Russia is killing citizens of Ukraine, that Russia is killing Ukrainian children, women, and men. We support Ukraine in this war. There is no Russian war and Russian boys. They are occupants and murderers. And that whole group of TV channel would have to say and reaffirm that. I imagine that would be a much better solution. If you did not do that, then do not offend us by coming later on the video stream on your social and crying crocodile tears that you had to fire a boy from your TV channel. I cannot believe you'd behave like that. This is rather despicable. This is an attempt to bring down Ukraine and live stream. We understand who they are, who Russian official media people are, who propagandists are. We know who are Medinsky, who Slutsky, Volodin. We know their politicians who are always on their propaganda channels. We understand that they have to talk about imaginary heroes in 1945, unlike, the real Soviet army. What did they do? And the same thing, they cannot talk about Bucha. They are talking about heroes on Russian propaganda. And they're treating their soldiers as Russian soldiers are the ones who came bringing good to Ukraine. They're not here to kill women and rape them and kill children. We understand when propagandists say that, but we do not understand when the owner of the channel comes and cries tears on the media stream and says that you all are cause and part of a problem, that a wonderful person was fired because of the statement. Perhaps she wants to come visit our country, check again Bucha, Mariupol, see the pictures of dead people, see their graves, maybe see their families, maybe come to Kherson to look at mass graves there. Can we invite her to exhumation of a family? Husband, wife, and 2 children, 5 and 8 years old. Perhaps she wants to see the dead bodies of these people who will never live again. Let's compare maybe our grievances. Firing of a journalist and dead bodies of a family who completely disappeared from the face of this earth. Let's compare and maybe cry about fired Korostelyov. Then, Yulia, tell me, why to talk to us if we are in different moral spaces? I'm not talking about information spaces, I'm talking about moral spaces. When for us, these two things are incomparable. To do what? What is in it for us? To come and talk to a person who has no truth in his face. When I am coming and talking to the person, when he situationally is aware that, well, yes, I'm in Latvia, I'm against Putin, but if things turned out differently, in 3 days Russia could have won and we would have no these problems. Well, indeed, right. In the other world, there are no problems. Well, Zitkova, the chief editor of Dozhd, he did say that the journalist is not coming back. So I think he understands your point of view. Okay, Yulia, I do not want to moralize over that too much. I'm rather pragmatic. You just asked the question, and I frankly think that all platforms are important for conducting the right dialogue, because I understand that perhaps the word that was not spoken timely can lead to a tragedy. And I do want to continue bringing our view, our federal politics, the view of our country, how we see things in this war. But I'm not giving an advice how to treat that. It's the choice of each of the person to make your own mind. What do you think about certain action? But in this case, it would make sense to come out and express your opinion vocally, elegantly, and clearly. I'm trying not to get into the squabble between the journalists and their groups there, but I do want to relay how I, Mikhail Podolyak, understand that situation. That whole discussion that's going in the media, for me, it's very obvious. And I know the side that I'm taking, that I've chosen on the 24th of February. There was no option for me. If somebody after 10 months of war still has not realized that, we perhaps will not be able to have a productive dialogue. Not because I don't want to, but because there is no common ground where we can find some commonality, because our values are so different. For me, the right to life is untouchable. The right to freedom is paramount. The right to determine where and how do I want to live, what books I want to read, who do I want to think as a hero, which books do I want to have. I don't want Putin to define that for me. His intellect is too weak to discuss that for me. If he wants to discuss Lenin with me, he doesn't know him. He hasn't read anything. He perhaps can write a last name with some mistakes. his level is not even on the level to intellectually talk about that. And I don't want his horde to be here and telling me that you need to love Rokossovsky, Zhukov, you must not read Kotlarevsky and forget Shukhevich. I don't want to listen to hear that, who don't even have a good command of their own Russian language. There is nothing to talk to them about, not about culture, literature, arts, nothing. I did talk to them during negotiations earlier. When you have a person looking at you from the other side of the table, like an animal, essentially, is looking at you, not even realizing what did you just say when we talk about historic situation and elements. I hope the leadership of TVRain will hear you. I noted that Zitko, their editor-in-chief, said that he is not inviting that journalist back. He said no to the owner of the channel on that topic. And the last important thing I wanted to touch today is ammonia. There are a lot of conversations that somebody already agreed with somebody and mentioned Firtash, the name of Firtash in their discussions. What is true, what is not? This is completely untrue. This is going on for 4 or 5 months already. That conspiracy is going to a crazy degree that some United Nations, American companies are participating in that now. The new thing they threw into the media is that there's some informal discussion in Istanbul between United States and Russia, and on the level of directors of Department of State. Of course, there are different conversations happening constantly, but they've been thrown in as some speculative subjects to suggest as the topic in these conversations, which are usually not public. And Russia is interested in selling, even at a discount. There's actual money in their ammonia, so there's a group interested in pushing it and selling it. Zelensky made it clear, get out of nuclear power plants, exchange all prisoners, all for all, and then we maybe can discuss some pipelines. I think that was voiced 4.5 months ago. Since then, nothing else happened, nothing changed. Russian Federation always prefers to create such a speculative curtain to create some smoke and mirrors and maybe figure out a deal or some angle to make money here and there. In this case, Zelensky makes it very transparent. You want something? These are the conditions of Ukraine. Exchange all for all and return to the proper jurisdiction, to the rightful owner, Zaporozhye nuclear power plant. The rest is just speculation. And how would you gauge the chances for return of Zaporozhye power plant? I think our chances are very high. Same as the chances for returning Donetsk, Lugansk, Melitopol, and Mariupol. Sorry, I worded it wrong. Was it a rhetorical question? No. I just see these negotiation attempts and all. I understand that Putin sees that he has to leave Zaporozhye because of the looming Ukrainian offensive there, and he needs to sell his withdrawal to earn something out of this situation. And they keep talking about Ukraine perhaps being able to return that power plant by negotiations. So I should probably rephrase my question. Does Ukraine need negotiations about that Zaporozhye power plant, nuclear power plant? Ukraine does not need negotiations about that object or any other. Ukraine needs to have a willpower to pause certain things, to keep the right pause. As you mentioned, there is a logic of war, and there is an understanding that there definitely are military processes happening on different directions. And what's important is to continue allowing the situations to evolve, so Russia would be negatively advancing, and essentially the transfer of all these objects are inevitable finale of ineffective invasion into Ukraine. This is not 2014, and we're not behaving ourselves like we did in Crimea in 2014. And we're not going to freeze the border on that new front line, which is a pipe dream of Mr. Putin. And we are planning operations to deblocade our territories occupied by Russian army at the moment. And what is important here is to have enough willpower to hold the right operative pause. So Mr. Putin would not get any bonuses from things that are otherwise inevitable. So basically, you are not going to do any negotiations about that nuclear power plant with him because they will be returning it to Ukraine anyway. I'll just clarify here one thing. It's not even Ukraine doing these negotiations about nuclear plant. It's Grossi, who is the head of International Atomic Commission, who is trying to conduct negotiations about demilitarized zone and stuff. Oh yeah, these guys from nations, they don't even need food. Just give them a right to do the negotiation somewhere. That's their self-importance button. Okay, the last question. We have been live for 54 minutes. Please continue subscribing to our channels, to share links to that stream in your social media. Don't forget to click like button. Ilya Yashin, Russian oppositioner, got 8.5 years in prison for stating what happened in Bucha, for calling genocide a genocide. When do you think when Ilya Yashin will leave prison? I think it's a brilliant question. I think he will leave prison when I will be on Yalta embankment in Crimea. 6 months, maybe? I think these are very parallel events, but something like that. I'm talking about Mr. Yashin here. He did not post any fakes, and he got 8.5 years of incarceration with a strict high-level colony for just transferring the data, for just transmitting what happened. And those people who are raping and killing are actually getting a carte blanche to continue going to Ukraine and killing more people. This is a catastrophe happening in Russia in their moral field. It must reach its finale, otherwise it erodes the whole country and will lead it to complete self-annihilation as an entity. So the faster these people like Yashin leave prison, because they see the world differently than other 90% of Russian Federation, and then Russia will have much higher chances to go through transformation and keep its territorial integrity, or much higher. Thank you very much, Mikhail. I am also of opinion that Yashin will not spend that whole term in prison. And I do hope that, I don't know if it's 6 months or more, but you will be on Yalta embankment. We will try, Yulia. We'll try to expedite that time. I said many times that one needs to understand it clearly, that transformation of Russia is impossible without a loss in this war. Not just a loss, but a horrible loss in this war, a rough loss in this war, and complete return of Crimea and other territories to Ukraine. I don't think they will have a revolution or a coup in Russia, but I'm sure that without return of Crimea, that will not happen. So, thank you, Mikhail. All the best to you. Thank you for that stream.